You already know what time it is. Welcome back into the NFL with AJL, episode 67. We're live on a Tuesday. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're right here tapped in with me on the show. You guys already know NFL free agency has been going absolutely nuts over the last 3-4 days, so you know we had to jump onto the pod and chop it up with you guys. Appreciate everyone that's watching live. If you want to like and share the stream, of course, subscribe on YouTube as you guys are always doing great. We're about 850 subs. Need another 150 so we can get to that next level of monetization. But if you want to drop a super chat or a super thanks on YouTube to donate directly to the channel, you can, or get at me on social media. Of course, if you want to support the podcast, that QR code, as always, in the corner of the screen will give you every bit of social media and podcast content. If you can't find me, you're simply not looking hard enough. At the NFL with AJL, hashtag the NFL with AJL. Hope you guys been doing good since I've been gone. March is literally here. 2024 is vanishing before our eyes, but I got an awesome guest coming on the show tonight. Very, very special guest who's actually in the news business, news producer at WYFF News, podcast host of Bleav and Hawks for the Bleav Podcast Network. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Brice Lewis to the show. What's up, dude?
Hey, what's up, man? How y'all doing tonight, man? Glad to be on. Glad for you to invite me on.
Yes, bro, 100%. As soon as I saw NFL free agency going crazy, I know we were kind of back and forth about getting on each other's shows and everything. And of course, you're working for Bleav. I know you've been real busy as well, man. So I appreciate you taking the time on a Tuesday night, a little late out of your busy schedule to go ahead and jump in with us. But yes, guys, we're chopping it up from Russell Wilson all the way to Saquon, Barkley, Mike Evans, and much more here on the show. So let's go ahead and jump into it, Brice. Maybe the hottest news of this 2024 NFL free agency period, as Russell Wilson was, of course, released from the Denver Broncos after the one-year stand with Sean Payton, and is now signing, or has signed rather, a one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Broncos will pay $38 million of his salary in 2024, while Pittsburgh will kind of have an embarrassment of riches for everyone else, only having to pay Russell Wilson $1.2 million. Do you think this was the best fit? And if you want to, give me some other landing spots that you possibly had in mind for Russell Wilson.
I think overall, I think this is probably was one of the strongest fits that Russell Wilson had. I mean, I think you got a situation where they're unsettled at quarterback. We don't know if Kenny Pickett is the guy. You know, they did right before this show trade Deontay Johnson. So, you know, they're having to figure that out.
Okay, so he was on the block. He was on the move.
So they have to figure that out. So I think this is a good situation for Russ. Russ knew he was going to play on a vet min for another team. So at the end of the day, it was just about what he felt was the best fit for him. And, you know, maybe him and Arthur Smith can make some magic together in Pittsburgh. They're going to compete, obviously, with Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson. But I think everybody looks at this as Russell Wilson's job to win.
Right.
But if Kenny Pickett wins, then obviously that may be a good sign for him. So Pittsburgh may look at this as, we either have the veteran or our young player steps up. So I think overall this is the best place. I mean, other places that you could look at, maybe Atlanta, but obviously we saw what they did, which we'll talk about later. I mean, outside of that, maybe Minnesota, obviously with that move. But it seems like this may have been Russell Wilson's best fit.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I called it maybe about a month or so back on the show. I was like, look, Russell Wilson needs to go align with that Steelers culture, get under Mike Tomlin. This was before Arthur Smith was brought into the mix. But, overall, I felt like this was a pretty solid spot for him, and I thought it was going to be the best fit for him, as well. This is more of a well-rounded culture, at least over the last few years, compared to what the Denver Broncos have done. Now, of course, they have that most recent Super Bowl championship with Peyton Manning in the 2015-2016 year. And I agree with you. The Falcons could have been a good one as well. I don't know about Raheem Morris as a coach, and I mentioned that in previous episodes as well. And I do think Zach Robinson as the OC would have been, pretty solid with Russell Wilson for sure. And then even the Minnesota Vikings, before we kind of saw them disbanding in free agency. And I don't even know if that's going to be a desirable landing spot. People still don't know about the Justin Jefferson contract, and that was kind of one of those big pulling points as well. Could we imagine Russell Wilson to a Justin Jefferson? It could be possibly insane. But I like that you bring up Arthur Smith. I want to piggyback off of that a little bit, because people are kind of on my back about this, but I'm not sold as of right now in today's NFL of Arthur Smith being an effective play caller. I understand he was at the mercy of Marcus Mariota for 13 games, Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, but you're talking about, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Tyler Algier, all of those defensive players, but focusing on the offense wasn't putting up much of, really a fight out there. 3 straight 7 and 10 years. And this is the biggest tagline for me about Arthur Smith. His 3 years with the Atlanta Falcons calling plays was not better than the final year of Dan Quinn when he was with the Atlanta Falcons, and of course, kind of deteriorating with that Matt Ryan figure. And I Bleav that, Arthur Smith could be solid for Russell Wilson, but I don't know. Maybe he just got thrown into a head coaching position that wasn't too solid. But I'm a little skeptical of Arthur Smith now controlling a veteran in Russell Wilson. He had a little bit of a hand on Ryan Tannehill, who had the lightning in a bottle season, and then he dealt with some of the rough quarterback play in Atlanta. But the Arthur Smith part is definitely something that kind of worries me here. Now, what are your thoughts on Russell Wilson out of all places to go? And again, maybe there was only 3 or 4 teams in the league. What are your thoughts on him joining literally the toughest division in the National Football League, Brice?
This really isn't new. I mean, if you think about where he just came from, people considered Denver in one of the toughest divisions of football, dealing with Kansas City, dealing with, the Chargers, even though they haven't been what people expected talent-wise. Every season you viewed them as a top team from a roster perspective. I mean, even the Raiders, even though they've been up and down, you never know what they could do.
Right.
So it's not really new for him. And then remember, he played during the peak NFC West with Seattle. 49ers were on top, Rams, all them. So this isn't new to him. He's used to playing hard-nosed football. He honestly is used to playing in ugly games. I don't even know if you remember the games, especially when they would always play the Panthers when he was in Seattle. Always would be 13-15, 18-15, ugly defensive showdowns. So I'm not surprised that the division is so tough and he's going to be able to handle that. I think Russell Wilson is in a position right now where, listen, if you look at his stats from last year, it looks great, even though
solid season he did.
Yeah, exactly. But we know that Russell Wilson isn't that special Russell Wilson. That's the difference. He's gone from special to just good. And I think that's been the issue when you're a quarterback who's been at the top for so long and then you're not. So I think you could still play well. And this, realistically, you could view this as Russell Wilson's quote unquote maybe last chance to prove that, oh, wait, he could still be a starting quarterback. He can win you games. He can still make the postseason. And then we'll see what happens. Pittsburgh's a great place to do it. They're always going to be well coached. Defense, the best in the league. So he's going to have those elements that he had in Seattle and Denver here in Pittsburgh. And now all he has to do is make it work. George Pickens, Arthur Smith, and see what those results turn out to be.
Yeah, he does have definitely a nice pickings of culture and talent as well. Guys, we got 48 people live with us, by far a record here on the show. Y'all make sure to like and subscribe, share the show wherever you're watching, at the NFL with AJL, at Brice, BRICEY _ 2K. Check him out on social media as well. I want to make sure that we get all of the content out to you guys. A lot of people viewing us on Twitter right now, so I really appreciate y'all tapping in there. Y'all go ahead and get into the chat too. But I got to agree with you, Brice, and I kind of, I feel ashamed to admit this, but with all of the media just going around Russell Wilson saying how he's washed, which I don't believe, and just all of the negative talk about him, it kind of makes you forget that he did play in the height of the NFC West and did have those 35, 40 plus passing touchdowns years. Of course, he was never in the MVP conversation later in the season. Unfortunately, we know about how he hasn't received a single MVP vote. But then when he went to the AFC West as well, he was in there with Patrick Mahomes. He was in there with, I think it was Derrick Carr at the time. And then also, Justin Herbert. So he has definitely stepped up to the plate throughout his career. And you're 100% correct. This isn't really anything out of the norm. I love how bold it is, though, because, I feel like when he went from Seattle to Denver, it was a rough exit, right? But now going from Denver to Pittsburgh, it's even rougher, and people have lower expectations. They don't have as many positive thoughts about Russell Wilson in this limelight. And just for him to come out here, basically play on that 1.2 million veteran minimum, kind of betting on himself in a way, because if he loses a damn quarterback battle to Kenny Pickett, we're having an entire another conversation. And at that point, I don't know how much more that I'll be able to defend Russell Wilson, to be honest with you, man. But I really think he has a chance to reignite something here in Pittsburgh, like he was looking to do in Denver. But, he wasn't really handled well, stepping up to the plate in this moment in the AFC North. AFC North, yes, I had to think for a second. He's still trying to prove that he's him. I still believe that he is him. I said it last year at one point mid-season. Sean Payton had fixed Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was back playing at that top 10, at worst, top 12 quarterback range. Let's touch a little bit on the departure from Denver. Do you believe Denver handled the situation correctly, which ultimately made him arrive in Pittsburgh?
I think there's a lot of controversy around it, obviously, because, they're trying to get him to get off money so they don't have to pay it, so they can save money.
They wanted out of that contract.
Exactly. And I think it's one of those things where when you look at that situation, it kind of shows you the dark side of the business. It shows you what business dealings can be like.
Right.
Imagine in the middle of a season where a team, especially if you're the team, you're thinking we're trying to be competitive. They go on that winning streak, they get back to 500, and then your coach is coming out talking to the quarterback saying, "Hey, we kind of don't want you to play no more, so we don't have to. You either have to get rid of that the money that we have to pay you. You can make that decision, or we just don't play you."
Yep.
Because imagine if you're a teammate and you're thinking, wait, we're just gonna give up the season because y'all don't want to pay him money.
Right.
Y'all want to give up, I think, his injury settlement clause in his contract.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, man, where you just kind of view it and just like, wow, this is kind of a little messy. So the departure wasn't the best, obviously. And Denver could have handled it better. And I mean, Russell's talked about it too before. So because he has no issues with the players, his issues with ownership, management, and Sean Payton.
Yep, the three that he did not think in his departure as he went on into year 13 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I totally agree, man. It was messy. It could have went a lot better. Me seeing how Sean Payton handled Russell Wilson was a little enlightening, but maybe not in the good sense to me, because we understand, him and Drew Brees really built New Orleans into what it was when we were there. We never heard stories of him and Drew kind of going back and forth with each other, stop kissing babies, benching Drew in the middle of the season if he wasn't playing well to avoid injury, settlements, which of course is a different situation. But it definitely surprised me with the way Sean Payton had come into Denver and ran things, because I had said Sean Payton and Russell Wilson are going to bring things out of each other that we have never seen before from both of them. And I had these guys in the AFC Championship game. I wouldn't have been shocked if they were able to make a Super Bowl. High expectations in a first year with a new coach and Sean Payton taking a year off and going to Denver. But I got to say, man, it wasn't handled well, not at all. First year, he had the brand new owner. The team was just sold. Brand new head coach and Nathaniel Hackett. We saw how awful that was. We understand how bad that coaching job was historically. And while Russell Wilson didn't play his best, it wasn't all his fault in that year. He did have a long time holding on to the football. The time to release was one of the lower ones in the league. But it was just like Arthur Smith coming out of Atlanta. Nathaniel Hackett was not cut to be a head coach. Now, Arthur Smith lasted 3 full seasons, and Nate Hackett, I think, got 14, 15 games under his belt before they just let him go, towards the end of the year. And then you come in with another head coach who we just talked about, Sean Payton, kind of doing him dirty, stop kissing babies, ripping him publicly, the camera cut to him on the sidelines. I don't have a problem with a head coach getting into their quarterback on the sideline, because that's your captain. That's the guy you paid the most money to. He probably sells the most tickets in the seats, barring if you have a, Justin Jefferson or maybe a Derrick Henry on certain types of teams. And it really bothered me when Sean Payton came out and basically quote, well, 2 things. He's on the herd, right? This is when we're kind of speculating where Sean Payton's going to go. He's already finished his, year of retirement, leaving the Saints, his, whole offseason off. And he's talking about how if he's got Russell Wilson, he would line up all of his hits and his best moves, kind of alluding it to music and saying, like, I would get the most out of Russell Wilson. I would make sure that he's highly successful. And then you go on and treat him like this. And the decision to bench him because of the injury stuff might have been from, higher ups in the front office and management. But for him to say, quote, I can't bench the entire wide receiver room, I can't bench the entire offensive line, just come out and say what you mean and mean what you say, Sean Payton in Denver. We understand that the haul that you put up for him with all of the picks that went to Seattle, the production was not matching up to that contract. So when you look at that from an eagle's eye view, it was pretty simple that they wanted to get out of that deal, because we know one of the most valuable things in the NFL, look at the embarrassment of riches with San Francisco, is a cheap/rookie quarterback contract. Once you have to pay these guys a lot, you're going to have to make decisions. And it's going to be interesting too to see what Denver does for the quarterback play. But you even look at Russell Wilson. He had to go through another scheme, another offensive coordinator with Sean Payton, which clearly didn't work out. But Russell Wilson had the same number of total touchdowns as Lamar Jackson. Russ had 29 touchdowns and 16 turnovers. Lamar had 29 touchdowns and 11 turnovers, including interceptions and fumbles. And maybe it's not the same comparison, or not maybe, because I know it's not, but Russell Wilson had more total touchdowns than Patrick Mahomes. We talk about tops of production for quarterbacks. So it wasn't that Russell Wilson wasn't performing. We know that numbers all that they're, that's not all that they're supposed to crack. They're not all that they're cracked up to be. But like I just said, Sean Payton had fixed him midseason. People on YouTube agreed with me. He was a top 10 to 12 quarterback and kind of back in his element. This was starting to be the Russell Wilson, hopefully, that we were coming to see. But before we get off this topic, man, give me how many wins you think Pittsburgh's going to have? Do they make the playoffs? And if so, what's the depth that's happening with it? And if you've got a potential first-year stat line for Russell Wilson with the Steelers.
It feels like every year when we count Pittsburgh out, because they've started slow the last couple of years. They seem to heat up.
They
They
have.
get hot. They get things right. So
Yep.
I don't see this year being any different. So I would say 9-10 wins,
Yeah.
just based off how they've been, because defense is going to be there. That's going to win them games, And then like I said, it's about making enough plays. If they make enough plays offensively, they're going to have a chance. They're going to have a chance to be in every game this year. So
Yep.
I think about 9-10 wins would be a good season for them. Don't know if that would win the division, but that may be probably good enough to get you a wild card. I know AFC was stacked last year. We'll see what that means this year.
Right.
Russell Wilson this year, I mean, if he had 29 touchdowns last year, I would think in this offense, again, depending on what happens with the receiving core, depending on what they do now, I could see that him being in that range, 25 to 30 touchdowns this season. Like I said, because the thing is that I'm saying this assuming that they're going to throw the football, because Arthur Smith
to Russ in the building
first.
now.
Exactly. Because Arthur Smith's a run first coach.
Right.
So
he is.
We'll see. So I'm saying 25 to 30 touchdowns for Russell Wilson. Probably around the same turnovers, 10 to 15.
Right.
Obviously, those ugly games that you can play in Pittsburgh snow, that can add to the total a little bit. But that's what I'm looking at right there. And I think it may be one of those things where Russell just gets comfortable early. Him and Arthur Smith try to figure it out. And then if Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson get on the same page, you'll start to see probably Pittsburgh middle of the season start stacking wins and making that push to the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I'm going to take it a tick up on the wins. I could see about 10 or 11 wins, so really about in the same ballpark as you. I think they'll have losses to Kansas City, the Chargers, the Cowboys, and then I think they'll split the divisional games with the Browns, the Bengals, and then, of course, the Ravens as well, being one of the toughest, if not, like we said, the toughest division in football. I could see them hitting a wild card or a possibly divisional round as well, and I think he'll have around, 4,000 yards passing, maybe about 450, 550 rushing yards, a few rushing touchdowns to go with that too. And like you said, if he was able to put up, 27, 28 passing touchdowns last year, what is he going to be able to do under a Mike Tomlin culture within a Steelers defense that's actually going to be able to back him up and not have to make him sweat, have more efficient drives, having that talent at his disposal with a Najee, with a Jalen Warren, obviously a George Pickens, and who knows what the Steelers are going to do as free agency moves forward. It would have been kind of sick to see Mike Evans go there. We're going to talk about his re-signing with Tampa later on in the show. But yeah, I think Russell Wilson's going to have a pretty solid year. I think it could be on par with the not recent years of Russell Wilson that we saw in Seattle, but it'll be not too terribly far from it. But y'all let us know what you think of the first topic here as we chopped it up. Russell Wilson going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Definitely was a crazy move. Like Brice and I said, we could have maybe seen Atlanta, maybe Minnesota, but a month or so back, it was like, man, this just really felt like it was the best landing spot for Russell Wilson. Now let's get into a little running back talk. As Saquon Barkley stays in the NFC East, the Giants refused to pay him the $12 million he basically would have landed with the franchise tag. They didn't tag him. He's now a Philadelphia Eagle, 3 years, basically $38 million, worth up to about $47 million. He's got $26 million fully guaranteed at signing. Brice, considering that Saquon Barkley has missed 24 games over the last 6 years, do you think this contract is too heavy for the Eagles being in the position that they're in?
Well, when you look at the value, the running back position has changed a lot. Yeah. Remember, probably about
such a spread.
I mean, maybe 5-7 years ago. I mean, running backs were going through getting paid $40, $50, $60 million.
Thanks,
and then the value has came down. I think that, Saquon, obviously he has major knee injury a couple of seasons ago.
Right.
Has kind of played through that. Seems to be getting back to what he was maybe prior to that injury. And, it's interesting because running the football wasn't necessarily the Phillies' issue last year. It was throwing the football. It was Jalen Hurts. Play calling.
Yep.
And so this move to me is just simplifies. This is probably what Saquon, because Saquon tweeted, said that he got the deal he wanted. That's why he went to Philly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because he got the money he wanted. And so for Philly, they probably just wanted more dynamicness. DeAndre Swift had a good year with Philly last year, but he's not dynamic. Saquon has more of a dynamicness to his game. And they probably looking at that as we can use him in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I think for Barkley, this is a good opportunity for him to kind of, stay in division. Obviously, he'll have those 2 games circled against the Giants on his schedule.
Yeah.
And just kind of
hell yeah.
Exactly. You know how it goes when you go to a rival in the division. Like a lot of players have signed a team rivals this free agency so far.
Mm-hmm.
But Barkley, for sure, he's looking to trying to show people that he can be the running back that he used to be. Now that he's gotten the money he's gotten, Philly's probably going to, I would think, game plan a little bit more with him, doing more with him. And I think that, like I said, with the running back value going down, to me, no, it's not too rich, because it's like this is just setting what running backs like him, because some people may consider him still a top 5 back in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is what you're getting for a top 5 back, then that's what's going to set the market for other backs that are considered around his range, especially in a draft class this year that's not that strong at the running back position.
Right. I don't think there's any first rounders that are expected to be running backs in this upcoming draft. I mean, outside of Blake Corum and maybe a couple of other names, like we're not looking at a pretty solid running back class like we've seen in previous years. And, even last year with Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think Zach Charbonnet was in there as well. We saw some guys that are going to be pretty solid, Kenneth Walker in the recent years. But yeah, when you look at the contract and as I phrased it when I first pitched it to you, only because he's missed 24 games in total over the last 6 years, I think it's a little frightening. He does come out. I want to make sure I get this number right here. He does come out to get, he's going to make about 12.5 a year. And what's crazy is the Giants only had to pay him 12.1, but the Giants said, no, that's okay. We'll bring in Brian Burns, who I understand is a defensive end, but we'll pay him $150 million. What? Like, okay, that's totally fine. We'll take him from Carolina and pay him that type of money. But when we've thought about the star players on New York over the last few years, the focal point has been Saquon Barkley. And I understand they haven't had a lot to deal with. OBJ wasn't super healthy when Saquon was starting to come in, and they've lacked a lot of talent, especially at the quarterback position. Maybe the weakest roster or wide receiver room in the NFL. And then you look at the running back room now with Saquon gone. It was definitely crazy to be able to witness all that. And again, with him making 12.5 on the year, when you look at the spread of running backs, top 5 paid guys, you have Alvin Kamara at 1. That's kind of an outlier. Of course, you have Christian McCaffrey 2, Josh Jacobs 3, Jonathan Taylor 4, and then Saquon 5. Saquon's above a guy, like Nick Chubb, who might be able to get a new deal, but he is, surprisingly 29, and he's coming off of now an injury in college and also an injury in the NFL as well. And then it gets a little shaky. You got DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. A lot of young guys are really taking up some of the top running back spots in this league. And of course, there's respect for the guys like Derrick Henry and everything. But when you stack it up to other running backs, and I think where they're at in terms of years in the league, it does kind of feel right. He did beat the franchise tag number. He has a maximum of earning about $15.8 million per year on his salary, I Bleav, barring that all of his incentives and everything kick in, which would be the second highest for a running back in NFL history if he hit an average per year salary of $15.833 million. And of course, he'll have to perform up to that expectation. But like you said as well, man, Saquon can definitely be in a top 5 position of running backs in the NFL. He has the capability to be that top 3 to 5 back in the league. We know how multifaceted he is. His skill set's amazing. He can go in between the tackles. He can bounce outside, hit him a screen, ask him to run a route. I haven't watched a whole lot of blocking tape on Saquon Barkley, but I'd like to Bleav that that's possibly a strong suit of his game. And if not, he makes up for it in other areas. But, this might shock some people. Saquon Barkley has rushed for 5,211 yards and 35 touchdowns in his 6 years with the Giants. He's also had 288 catches for another 2,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. So on average, every year, Saquon Barkley has given you about 1,000, 1,100 scrimmage yards. Now, we know he had the ACL and MCL injury. We know he's played a couple years hurt. And that's going to be the big decision here is if he's able to stay durable, how is this contract going to look hindsight when we're, 8, 9, maybe 10 games into the year and Saquon Barkley's got, possibly 100, 150 carries, whatever the math would turn out to be for a running back at that point. In the year. Do you think you would have liked to see Saquon go elsewhere, or do you feel like Philadelphia was maybe the best fit for him?
The way the running back market has gone, there's definitely plenty of other places he could have went. I could have saw Dallas getting the ball, especially with Tony Pollard walking. You could have saw obviously Green Bay cut Aaron Jones. So if he was on the market at that time, that could have been a place. They're Bengals as well, even though they didn't want to pay big money for Mixon, so maybe not. But from that perspective, just letting him go could have opened something up. It was one of those things where it really just depended which franchise and which team was willing to pay Saquon Barkley money to be their top back and be a big part of their offense. I think that was the big thing. And here's a fun fact. Last year, for top paid running backs, a lot of people don't know this, The top paid running back last year actually was not even a guy who played a snap. It was Bijan Robinson.
Mm,
A lot of people didn't know that because I think his signing bonus was like 12 million his
yeah,
first year. And then a
yeah,
salary, I think, for the year was like a million. So he
yeah.
made like 13, and that was
Mhm.
the highest paid. And people were like, what? So what he made this year is pretty much that's top running back money,
Yeah.
So
I think if you can make
um
above 10 million a year as a running back, as unfortunate as that is to say, I think you're in good hands in the NFL because I think only 5 or 6 backs in the entire league make above 10 million, let alone that 12, 13, 14, like some of the top guys.
Yep, pretty much. So that's kind of the big thing. Saquon could have fit a lot of places. There's a lot of teams that probably, if you had an offensive creative mind, that could have did a
Hmm.
lot with him.
That's
But
what he needs.
realistically, he now gets out of New York. They've had a terrible offensive line, terrible quarterback. Now he's not going to be the primary focus of defenses. He gets to now have the ability in Philadelphia to now know they have Levante Smith, they have AJ Brown. They're not going to focus on me, and that can open up Saquon to have a potentially really big year in Philadelphia.
Yep. Yep. No doubt about it. I stand corrected. Alvin Kamara was not the first in terms of money per year. It was actually Christian McCaffrey, but Alvin Kamara has the biggest running back contract. I Bleav the Saints did 5 years for 75 million. So an average of 15 mil a year. And that is painfully hurting us now. We know the Saints are in salary cap hell. And unfortunately, Alvin Kamara has fallen off year after year. I'm hopeful with Clint Kubiak, but let me not get too much in the Saints. I surprisingly didn't put them on this show. That'll be coming on Friday because we just had a ton of NFL free agency to get into. It would have been cool to possibly see him go somewhere else. I had the Bills on my list. I feel like the Bills have been a top running back destination for quite a few years now. Of course, we know Josh Allen, maybe more times than not has led the team in rushing. We know that Zach Moss has been there. I'm trying to think. Oh, James Cook. Of course, James Cook, he's a very solid running back as well. I'm glad that he's been able to get his lion's share of the carries, actually become that, maybe not bell cow back, but the first featured back in a, maybe running back or slightly running back by committee setup that they have in Buffalo. But I even said it last year, Saquon Barkley to the Bills would have been huge. I even talked about maybe Alvin Kamara to the Bills as well. Just a big running back move that they could make. So Josh Allen doesn't have to put up 44 touchdowns in a year like he did this year and turn the ball over 24 times like he did this year. Give him a little bit of relief on the back end. Give him that solidarity of just turning around, putting the ball in the running back's belly, maybe 15 to 25 times a game, divide up your carries. It doesn't all have to be your running back one, as we like to think that, Derrick Henry would get 28 to 35 carries and run for 275 yards. Not everyone's like that, but it would have been nice to see some relief for Josh Allen. I had the Texans on this list as well. I was really hyped when I heard of Saquon possibly going to the Texans. I saw some of those reports leaking too, and I'm like, man, give CJ Stroud Saquon Barkley in his second year. He's already got Tank Dell holding it down. He's already got, Nico Collins, Noah Brown. Hopefully John Mechie's able to come around. Robert Woods is a pretty solid guy who can plug in and out of some offensive schemes. Obviously the Ravens picked up Derrick Henry, but I thought that would have been a solid notion as well. And then of course the Cowboys, like you said, ever since Zeke has gotten out of there, they pride themselves on running the football. Mike McCarthy loves to run the football. And while he does have a good to borderline great quarterback in Dak Prescott, it wouldn't have been a complaint to, see Saquon land in Dallas. Now, like you said, it wasn't really the fact that Philadelphia didn't have a solid running back last year as to why they tailored off on the back end. It was more of play calling and horrible defensive output. So with that being said, how much better do you think the Philadelphia Eagles really get with Saquon Barkley now being in there on that payday?
I think you get a little bit better. Obviously, when you sign a player of his caliber, you always feel like you get a little bit better, get more dynamic from that running back position. And anytime you can get more dynamic, that's always big. It can make the offense more big play potentially. But overall, I mean, like I said, there are some other things, like I said, they need to fix. Like you said, the back end and the play calling, and then just, obviously Jalen Hurts did not have his best season. So hopefully getting him back closer to what they were 2 years ago instead of last year. So
Yeah.
realistically, I think Barkley has the potential to have a big impact at Philly. I think he's going to be put in a position where, again, it gets cold in Philadelphia, and it may snow a little bit, and if you're going to have to run the football, I think a lot of people would want to have Saquon Barkley as their running back, and he's probably in that division, probably now still the best back in the division.
Mm-hmm.
So
for sure. Austin Eckler could compete, but he's with Washington. So
yeah, then obviously this isn't the Austin Eckler from 2020. This is different. Okay,
yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think Saquon can have a big impact for him. I just think it's just a matter of them just using him the correct way. Absolutely. And like I said, him taking advantage of the opportunities he's now going to get with Philadelphia.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And when you look back at Saquon's stats over the year, I mean, he had 261 carries his rookie year, which is actually kind of crazy. 217 the year after that, injured, 162, 295, 247. So I Bleav we're going to see Saquon Barkley get over 200 carries, maybe in that 225 to 250 range. I think that would be a little much on him. Again, he has missed 24 games over the last 6 years. He's been mostly healthy in the recent years after the ACL and the MCL injury. But, I thought DeAndre Swift was pretty good to, if not
Yeah,
great last season for the
he was fine.
Philadelphia
Yeah.
Eagles. They schemed him up well. Of course, the play calling tailored off as the season went on, and we saw things fall out of line. But, DeAndre Swift was solid. We saw Miles Sanders the year before, who had 1,200 rushing yards. But ever since Shady McCoy left in 2014, which is crazy to say a decade ago, the leading rusher also for the Philadelphia Eagles in franchise history, they've only had two 1,000-yard rushers. And that was literally DeAndre Swift last year, Miles Sanders the year before. But in the last 3 seasons, Philadelphia has been 8th this year, 5th the year before, and 1st the year before that in terms of rush yards per game. They were 1st in the year that Jalen Hurts was the leading rusher at not even a total of 1,000 yards, which is a lot to do for a quarterback, 784. But I don't think it, and I love Philadelphia. I love Jalen Hurts. I think Sirianni's solid. I love the Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio hire. Maybe two of the best coordinator duos in the league, or one of the best coordinator duos in the league. And some people might digress, but I don't think this is going to really take them over the top or add, let me say this. It will add another notch to their run game because, again, 2,100 yards, over 268 catches and 12 touchdowns in 6 years as a running back in today's league, where the running back position isn't very valued and it is used, but we see, touches. It feels like more times than not go elsewhere, especially to wide receivers and tight ends. I think that they could be top 10 in rush yards per game this season for sure. And I think that, Kellen Moore is going to do a solid job with Saquon Barkley. And call me crazy, but I think Saquon Barkley could be in for a career year. I really think he could be in for his best year yet with Kellen Moore. I love that offensive coordinator sighting because if he was able to do this under Mike Shula, which was his first 2 years, Jason Garrett, who went there after he lost a job with Dallas, and then Mike Kafka, I will be probably amazed at what he's able to do with Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore's not liked by a lot of people around the league. I thought he was pretty solid. I know he didn't have the greatest year. I Bleav it was the Chargers after he had left, the Cowboys, but he knows how to do his job. And I don't Bleav he's going to mishandle Saquon Barkley here. All right, Brice, T. Higgins has requested a trade after being tagged by the Cincinnati Bengals. Give me your top landing spots for T. Higgins now that he is, officially on the market.
For me, actually number one on my list was the Panthers.
Oh, really?
Like I said, but because
they need somebody.
That was their biggest need was wide receiver.
Right.
They got to get a receiver for Bryce Young. You can't be successful with no receivers. We saw what happened last year. Now,
Yes,
like I said, now that they traded for Deontay Johnson, I don't know if that changes things. That probably will change things. I'm thinking
that's
probably
huge.
Who else maybe needs a wide receiver. I mean, you could maybe see. I mean, I know
Bills,
some people are wondering,
Chiefs.
Bills, Chiefs, potentially, because, especially the Chiefs, we know what their receiving core. They have some talent there, but obviously you always could get that number one guy.
Mm-hmm. It's really only Rashee Rice and Kelsey now, though. They cut MVS. Sky Moore's not doing much.
I mean, and then I know some people were maybe thinking, Colts if Michael Pittman didn't come back, but he came back.
Right.
So that's going to be the case. You think who?
I said, I still think the Colts are a suitor, no doubt. Anthony Richardson's going to be special. I think, what's it? Darby, are you being for real? Did T. Higgins just go to the Chiefs? Don't tell me that. Hold on. I have to look this up right now. Did he just go to the Chiefs? Darby loves to troll, but nope, he didn't. Okay, we're just you got to be careful, man. You got to give me some more context. That would be a great landing spot for sure. But no, I think the Colts would be good. Not to cut you off, I want to let you continue on. But with Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen, I think T. Higgins could really come to life for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, I mean, I know they have to deal with their cap situation because they're in terrible cap situation right now. Chargers probably are going to end up cutting Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. If they can get the cap situation right, maybe there. Thing is, T. Higgins is going to want monster money. So we got to also think about teams who could pay that. Could potentially the Commanders be in there? Team up with Terry.
He's got a big market.
Yes, you could team up with Scary Terry. I mean, Denver, since they got rid of Jerry Jeudy, and could that potentially be a landing spot as well? Just a few teams that potentially could be in that direction. And then we got to see what happens with Jacksonville and Calvin Ridley. If they don't get Calvin Ridley back,
he wants to come back reportedly.
Yeah, he wants to come back. So I think that'll happen. But it's just if something changed in the ninth hour, you know, would that could potentially be a good landing spot. Now, obviously, the Bengals have been like, we would like to still keep him, but I get it. You're probably about to give Jamar Chase a monster, like he's about to become probably the highest paid receiver in the game.
He's going to have to make 30. Him, CD,
Yeah.
and Justin Jefferson are all looking for that Tyreek Hill money, no doubt.
So, and T may think I'm 20, I may be worth 25. You
Right.
may not want to put 55 million into two receivers.
Right.
So it has to be a team who obviously has cap, who's willing to invest, and probably feels like they need a receiver to take them over the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. Very, very good points there. I think overall the top landing spots would be the Bills, of course. Well, let me say this first. T. Higgins has been anointed by some to be respected as a wide receiver one. And while I do Bleav he can do that, he puts up an average of 920 yards and about 4 or 5 touchdowns a year. To me, that's not 2024 and onward wide receiver one production. If you're a wide receiver one, I'm going to need at least 1,000. Probably in that 1,100 to maybe 1,300 yard range. And I'd like to get at least 7 to 10 touchdowns out of you. And when you get to double-digit touchdowns, I have a lot of respect for that. There's not many receivers in the league every year, and on average every year, like a Mike Evans or, a Randy Moss could do, where they're giving you, 11, 12, 14, 15 touchdowns, maybe not year over year. But like you look at Mike Evans. Mike Evans has had 12 plus touchdowns in 5 of his 10 years in the league. And he's regarded as that wide receiver one because he's had 1,000 yards for a decade straight. Now, not to compare apples to apples, but to me, T. Higgins would be a very solid wide receiver two. If he went to a team to be a wide receiver one, which like we saw, he can have those 1,000-yard seasons with Cincinnati. But I think there was a reason Jamar Chase was able to take that wide receiver one position. Jamar was just better. And it's not to say that T isn't, but if he went to the Bills, I think he would do well alongside Stephon Diggs. We've talked about the Bills needing a second option for Josh Allen.
The issue with that is, though, me not meaning to cut you off, is that
you're good.
Bills already have the tension with Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want to bring in a receiver who's going to demand targets and now potentially make Diggs want to leave?
Yeah.
That's the only reason why the Bills is very shaky to me.
Right.
Just because Diggs is already wanting 15, 20 targets a game. He wants to get his yards and his touchdowns. He believes he's one of the best, if not the best receiver in the game. So breaking in T. Higgins, paying him monster money may rub Diggs the wrong way if they went down that route, So that would be the big thing. Because if you're bringing in T. Higgins, you're probably bringing him to be probably your number one. I think teams view him as that because you would assume, okay, Jamar Chase is in there.
Potential.
If Jamar Chase isn't there, clearly his numbers are going to go up because Jamar Chase to me is like, I call a volume receiver. He'll get you 10, 12, 13 catches a game. T. Higgins is more of I can get you 6 catches for 100 yards and maybe a touchdown. Like I said, Jamar can get you 13 for 180 and, like that. So,
yeah, no, that's a good point. And I don't know, what Stephon's contract looks like with the Bills, but if Stephon Diggs were to eventually move on or have some sort of reason to not play, which I don't think is realistic, but we could see T. Higgins step in as that number one receiver for a team like the Bills. I think the Jets could be a solid spot as well. Garrett Wilson is there and T. Higgins could possibly come in. I don't think he could be that wide receiver one, but if it did happen, again, he's got the potential. Wouldn't surprise me. We've seen Garrett Wilson be an offensive rookie of the year, though. We know the production that he's capable of. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously the Los Angeles Chargers, they both need guys like crazy. Now, while they do have talent, and they have a lot of talent at the quarterback position, very solid head coaches, of course, with Harbaugh coming into L.A., T. Higgins would be a very, very nice addition there. I think the Baltimore Ravens also. I don't believe OBJ is going to be back in Baltimore. I think it's really just going to be the Zay Flowers and, the Rashad Bateman show possibly. And while I did like Rashad Bateman coming out of the draft, I think he's been a respectable player. I think we can all sit here and agree that, T. Higgins would be a nice addition there as well. Of course, you talked about the Steelers. I think 100% would be in play. But George Pickens is that bona fide one. And again, I just view T. Higgins as a number 2 receiver. Maybe I'm a little jaded because Jamar Chase came in, blew us away with, the best rookie season ever with basically 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. But, T. Higgins is still, a very good player, no doubt. And with Deontay Johnson getting out of there, I could see him and George Pickens being a solid duo. Of course, we talked about the Colts, the Packers. Who's their wide receiver one? I mean, Romeo Doubs is solid. Christian Watkins is solid. They lose Aaron Jones, though. They're going to need some firepower at that receiving position. And especially with what Jordan Love just did, you don't want to spoil that. You don't want to knock that momentum down. Giving him a guy like T. Higgins, I think if you put T. Higgins with Jordan Love, you're going to see a 1,200-yard, 8 to 9 touchdown year with T. Higgins. And in the comments, y'all don't jump on me and say, oh, well, you just gave him a wide receiver one output. if he's in the right situation, he can be a wide receiver one. And you can't say that for everyone in the league. But again, to me, he's more of that wide receiver two type of guy. And maybe I'm a little bit of a homer here, but I Bleav that, T. Higgins could go to the Saints. Of course, we're in cap hell, so the money wouldn't work out. But Michael Thomas is going to get out of there. We know Olave's the one. Shaheen more than likely going to be the two. We got A.T. Perry that we just brought in from the draft, who I think can, be the next two or not three, for us in that position. But again, T. Higgins coming in, he could overtake that two position from Rashid. You could have Olave one, T. Higgins two, maybe have Rashid three for the deep threat, and then bring in A.T. Perry. But I'd like to see A.T. Perry get a little more, a little more touches there as well. But despite all this that we've laid out, do you think he should just try to go back and forth with Cincinnati and get a deal to stay with the Bengals?
I mean, I think that's what it's going to turn into. I think T. Higgins is definitely a guy who may not be moved for the draft. Because I think it's one of those things where, you're always more valuable before the draft because everybody knows your picks. Everybody knows how much their value are for this current draft class.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what's hurting him is that I can see the Bengals looking at this wide receiver class, one of the deepest wide receiver classes we've had in a while. A lot of talented wide receivers coming out just saying, listen, we have a number that we're willing to give you. And knowing that if you don't want to stay, we can go and just draft a replacement. We do still have Jamar Chase, who will probably give him what he wants. So it really is just a matter of what does T. Higgins want?
Mm-hmm.
Does he want to stay in Cincy? Is he okay being the number two? Does he want the challenge of being a number one and getting his money?
Right.
That is things that he has to answer. I think him requesting this trade was him kind of saying, I want to go get my money and I want to go be a number one. And this could also just be about the money. He may be okay being a number two as long as he gets his money, which the Bengals may not be willing to give him, like I said, because of the Jamar Chase contract. So it's one of those things where I think the Bengals, like I said, I think the Bengals still want to bring him back. It's just they're gonna have negotiations, and they're eventually gonna get to a point where they're like, this is where we are. This is the peak of what we're gonna do. If not, then we will move. We will become more aggressive to trade you, and that's when I said, like, when you get to the draft, that's when you'll see teams become a little bit more aggressive. Bengals maybe could package Higgins if they wanted to trade up for a guy, maybe
AJ Brown,
Higgins,
Hollywood
this,
Brown thing.
So all these are potential avenues the Bengals could go down. So they have options with T, or this could all just end in no extension and T. Higgins just playing on the franchise tag, which no player ever wants to do.
Right. But here's the thing too, and hear me out. Would you say $21.8 million for a guy like T. Higgins in a wide receiver 2 role? And the Bengals have already said that when they tagged him, they said, look, we're willing to pay you $21.8 in 2024. Wouldn't you say that's fair for T. Higgins though? I get it if he wants the 25 and maybe close to 30. I probably wouldn't pay him over the 25 and maybe with his recent production over that 22. But Cincinnati's already agreed with that tag to pay him 21.8.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the franchise tag is interesting because you always think when you're just the person who looks at it, it's like, well, you're getting paid top 5 money. But the thing is that what players want is that long-term commitment. They want the guaranteed money. They want to know
exactly
if I get hurt that I'm not screwed. Because if he gets hurt this year and he's out for the year, exactly. And I think it's just about that financial security. So I think you could pay him upwards. He had some injuries this past year. The previous 2 years, he had 1,000-yard seasons. So I think and listen, at the end of the day, the Bengals know one of the reasons why we've been so successful is because we've had Higgins, Chase, and Burrow. We have had dynamic passing offenses. They're always in it because of that. So it's almost like, do you really want to break that up? I think that they know the value T. Higgins brings to this offense and what they want to be passing wise with Joe Burrow coming back next year. It's just a matter of, like I said, them finding the right number they want to pay him. And like I said, T. Higgins wanting that long-term security for his whatever contract he wants. Because like I said, no player likes playing on the franchise tag.
Yep, you want that financial security, like you said, with the injuries and everything. The two sides have until July 15th to work out a new long-term deal if a trade doesn't happen first. And, T. Higgins came out and said that he wants to stay with the team long-term. But I think this says everything. There's been no contract talks for the last year. March 2023 was the last time that T. Higgins and the Cincinnati Bengals actually had contract talks. I don't know if that means contract talks that were gaining traction, just talking about it in general. I'm not sure, but that's what the reports are telling us. So that's what we have to go by. And I think it would benefit him already being, with Joe Burrow, with Zach Taylor, alongside Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd as well. I think his targets could, go up some. He could have better production, especially because of the situation that he's in. I think it's a solid situation for him. He was drafted by Cincinnati. He's probably got his roots out there. If he's got children, if he's got a lady, like they're all out there. And, like we're going to talk about Mike Evans next. If a player ever has the chance to stay with a team that drafted them, because people don't think about, when you're a journeyman, when you're a guy like, God, I'm trying to remember the wide receiver's name. Record amount of times he's been traded. Is it Robert Woods? I can't remember. There's a record amount of times that a wide receiver
the league a lot. Either him or Brandon Cooks.
Brandon Cooks. There we go. So journeyman. I think he's been traded like a record 5, 6, 7 times. People don't realize when you have to uproot you, and if you've got kids and if you've got a lady, like you're headed to another state. That doesn't mean you can immediately settle down, buy the house that you like. Like you're probably renting. You might be, not doing a month-to-month thing, but like you don't have that security. And I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that like when a player is drafted to a city that they've enjoyed being there with, that they've had success with, why would they want to leave? 99% of the time, it's because of the money. And like, you can't blame these guys for not wanting to take a hometown discount, for wanting to chase bigger and better things. That's what it's all about, is being the best you can be, being in that top 1% of the 1% of the 1% in the National Football League. So I do think that it would definitely benefit him to stay with Cincinnati. Sticking to the wide receiver talk here, and then we'll hit a break after this and get the back half of the show. Mike Evans resides with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2 years, $52 million. I think it's absolutely well-deserved. Give me some of your losers from this signing, or AKA, other teams that might have been in the mix for him and maybe should have taken a shot at him.
It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to say because of the fact he was signed literally before he could even talk to people.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the same obvious people, Bills, I guess now
Chiefs, Chargers, Ravens,
Panthers, obviously, since they, like I said, needed a receiver. All these teams would have probably been in on Mike Evans. Just because he's been Mr. Production, Mr. Consistent, 1,000-yard season since he's into the league, regardless of age, regardless of quarterback. I think he came in with Josh. Did he come in with Josh Freeman? He didn't come in with Josh Freeman, but he played with Josh Freeman, though.
Yeah.
I think he did. So they Buccaneer fans know the quarterback carousel they've had there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just Mr. Consistency. So, obviously the teams who obviously need receivers and could not actually talk to him beforehand, obviously would probably be the teams that you would look at as losers, because I'm sure a lot of people were willing to pay Mike Evans, especially on a shorter term 2-3 year deal. Obviously, he is in his 30s, so you're not going to give him the monster long-term deal, but something where you think he can still be productive for 2-3 years. So
I mean, I think the $26 million a year is fantastic, considering, the production of Tyreek Hill, which is more than Mike Evans, but it's not like we're going to say Tyreek is leaps and bounds better than Mike. It's two different types of games. But when Tyreek, 2 seasons ago, got the $120 million over 4 years, $30 million for a wide receiver a year was a lot. I mean, Tyreek said in an interview he wanted to get to just, like 90, maybe 95 M's. And they ended up giving him 120. He wants to play out that contract and then possibly retire from the league. But I think Mike Evans getting this money at the age in his NFL career, 10 years in, and you're getting a 2-year deal, $26 million a year, very solid. I think there's 6 big losers out of this signing. And again, you made a good point. He got signed before the tampering window was open, and that's smart. Mike Evans said that he wanted to stay there. I remember last year when his agent basically said, Mike's been here for 9 years. He's done nothing but produce. He brought the city a Super Bowl. He was Brady's most, I guess you say Brady brought it to him, but he was a big part of the Super Bowl run, right? Brady loved him as a target. But if you guys don't give him the money, I believe my client will be looking for, to take his talents elsewhere. And that was heard very loud and clear last year. Mike Evans came out again, had a top 3 year of his career, and rightfully so gets the payday. Obviously, the Chiefs would have been fantastic. Of course, the Ravens as well. The Chargers would have been solid too, because Mike Evans is that solid one. The Chiefs need a one. We can entertain the fact that Travis Kelce is that wide receiver one. And if he had WR in front of his position, then we would call him that. But he is a tight end. And again, not taking anything away from T. Kels there. The Chargers are in a bit of a predicament. What's going on with Keenan? Quentin Johnston seems like he's going to be a bust. I hope Jim Harbaugh can really revive him. And then Mike Williams as well. The Ravens, it would have been interesting because I think you're going to slide Zay Flowers to the 2, and I feel like Zay has really secured his position as the one there. Steelers, maybe. Now we know DeAndre Johnson's off the block, but I really get the vibe that George Pickens, and everybody knows that Pickens is that wide receiver one. I think the Colts could be looking for a wide receiver one, and the Packers as well. So a lot of similar guys that, we said with T. Higgins. Do you think him staying in Tampa, though, considering that Baker's still quarterback, considering that you do have not Byron Leftwich, Todd Bowles as that not defensive coordinator, as that head coach? Because I feel like Mike still wants to win. He's still one of the best in the NFL. Do you Bleav staying in Tampa was the best fit for him in terms of, him wanting to win more rings?
It's easy to say no, but at the same time, like you said, he's been in the league, he's been in Tampa Bay as long as he has. For him, he probably has roots there, family there. 100%. Doesn't want to uproot all of it. I don't think, and especially we underrate the fact, like you said, he run a ring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of those things where it's like, I've never won one. It's like, I've won one. Yeah, and if I can win one more here in Tampa Bay, that'd be fantastic. But I don't think it's something that he felt like I need to go chase. That's why he was willing to have this deal be done before free agency even started. Mm-hmm. So because he wanted to be back in Tampa Bay, I think, especially after last year, all he could say is, well, we went to divisional playoffs last year with Baker Mayfield. So I have no reason to not believe we could still be good or improve or whatever. So it's not like the season we just came off made me worry. It's not like this was a 3-14 season where it's like, maybe it is time. They had a winning season and he wants to stay there. I think he and Baker have really good chemistry. And I think he wants to continue that chemistry with him and continue to build on that. Obviously, him, and Chris Godwin have been there for a while together. So I think overall, I think he probably just felt like for him, especially at this point in his career, we don't know if these are the last years of Mike Evans. We have no idea.
Right.
He really
probably be 2 years down the road.
Let me just stay with the one team. Let me finish out what I'm doing here. I'm making my money. I got a ring. Try to continue to produce. And let's see what happens.
Yeah, no question. I don't think it's his best chance to win another ring here. And like you said, it could easily have been said no. But he's been here for 10 years. Kind of a rhetorical question here. But some people are going to wonder, was this the best fit? People were salivating, oh my God, if he goes to the Chiefs, what if the Chargers are able to snag him up? What if the Steelers or Colts or Packers, like we were just mentioning, could possibly get in there as well? But losing Dave Canales is going to change a lot for sure. We know he's the head coach of the Carolina Panthers now. And Dave Canales really did a lot of good things with Baker Mayfield, gave him his best career year. Obviously, Mike Evans stayed up in production as well. But believe it or not, he just came off of basically a career year in the NFL. He led the NFL in receiving touchdowns for the first time in his career. He was tied for his second personal best year in receiving touchdowns with 13. It's the third best personal year for receiving yards with 1,255. And that was with Baker Mayfield. He was doing this with Baker, with Tom Brady over a few years, with Jameis Winston for a long stretch, with the Josh Freeman, like you said. Now, the new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, he did a lot of good work with Kentucky and the Rams over the last 6 years, kind of bouncing between the two, being offensive coordinator at Kentucky and with Los Angeles, being the assistants QB coach, especially under Sean McVay. It's always going to be some good experience when you can put that on your resume in this league as coaching experience. But it's going to be interesting to see how things play out, because we saw when Philadelphia lost their coordinators, they weren't nearly the same team. And this isn't apples to apples, but a guy in Dave Canales, who was a first-year OC, being able to, have the type of production or give the type of production to this team like he did, it's going to be something to keep an eye on. This might be an obvious question, but is Mike Evans a no-doubter, not just a Hall of Famer? Is he a no-doubter Hall of Famer to you?
Yeah. I think Mike Evans deserves to be first ballot, to be honest with you. I think he's the guy who just, it's funny because he's never been the big name in the headlines all the time. He's never been that guy, but from the numbers and what he's done, he definitely, to me, feels like first ballot Hall of Fame guy that he's definitely the guy we're going to get older, tell our kids and be like,
oh yeah,
hey, man, Mike Evans, man, he was that guy back in Tampa Bay. Like, he's one of those guys. So I think he definitely, to me, is no doubt first ballot Hall of Fame, especially again, if he finishes out his career with more 1,000-yard seasons. I mean, he broke the record for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, I Bleav.
Mm-hmm. So no one's ever done it for 10 straight years in the league. Not Jerry, not Randy, nobody.
So how if he's doing something that even they didn't do, why doesn't he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame first ballot?
Mm-hmm. I think he's a no-doubter as well. First ballot might be tough because we've seen a lot of receivers that have taken, some time. I Bleav, I think Marvin Harrison's still trying to get in. I think, I just had it on the top of my head. I think Reggie Wayne is still trying to get in there. And obviously, these guys haven't been exactly like Mike Evans. But when it comes to receivers getting into the Hall, I feel like you really got to do a good bit. But when you look at Mike's resume, I Bleav he's done a good bit. 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons, never happened before. 5 of those years, he's had 12 plus touchdowns in the NFL. Super Bowl champion. Finally, he's had some of the best hands of his generation. Great route runner. The tracking ability of the football when he's a deep threat. He's always going to get his targets in the red zone, which is why he consistently is able to have double-digit touchdowns in the league. But here's what a lot of people I think don't realize, Brice. Barring injury, Mike Evans is going to hit 12,000 yards and 100 touchdowns in his 11th year in the NFL. He could even hit 13,000. He's at 11,680 right now. He needs 1,320 yards receiving to hit 13,000 career yards. He's 100% going to do that this year. If not, he's going to end up at, let's see, maybe 12-8, 12-7. But by the time he finishes out this deal, he's going to be a 13,000 yard receiver. And when you go and look at some of the guys that are in the ranks of the NFL, of course, Jerry's up there with basically 23,000. No one's going to catch him. The second closest is Larry Fitzgerald, played for 16 years and is still, about 5,000 or so yards short. But let's just talk about him getting into that 13,000 yard range. And I think 14,000 even is going to be in the realm as well. If he hits 14,000 yards in his career, he's going to pass Chris Carter, Anquan Bolden, Julio Jones, Torrey Holt, Andre Reed. You're going to have Jason Witten, Steve Largent, and he's going to be chasing guys like a Marvin Harrison, like a Reggie Wayne. He's not going to be far off from Andre Johnson. He's going to be looking after a Steve Smith, going up there against a Tony Gonzalez. When you start to put your name in that type of conversation, I think it's a no doubt that Mike Evans will be a Hall of Famer. I'd love for him to be first ballot, but I think that, might be a little bit to ask considering how we've seen some receivers over the years, play things out. About halfway through the show, we got another half coming. I'm going to hit a quick break, and then we'll get into these last 4 topics. I don't mean to keep you forever, man, but this NFL free agency period was nuts. And again, I was happy to have you be able to jump on the show. This is episode 67 of the NFL with AJL. I appreciate everybody watching. We got about 80 people consistently on Twitter that are watching us. Never had you guys tune in like that before, so I super appreciate y'all. Please make sure to like and share the stream wherever you're watching. Subscribe on YouTube. You can drop that super chat or super like, super thanks, whatever the hell it is on YouTube, to donate directly to the channel. At the NFL with AJL, at Brice_2K on all social media platforms, so you can check us out. Again, I got Brice Young. I almost gave you the Brice Young name, bro. I got Bryce Lewis here with me on the show, chopping it up on episode 67. Of course, the QR code there in the corner of the screen will give you every bit of social media and podcast content. If you can't find us, you're simply not looking hard enough. And we're sponsored by Buy and Sell with AJL for all your worldwide professional real estate needs, whether you're looking to buy a home, sell a home, or invest in real estate. Buy and Sell with AJL is the team that you need on your side. You can drop your email in the comments or DM them on social media to get on their exclusive newsletter or to take advantage of their AI systems as well that they've implemented for their clients. And we're also sponsored by PlayStation Online, the best collab if you're looking for a gaming and worship collab. Of course, you see the logo there, praying hands, PlayStation colors, super dope. Shout out to the Gilliams for letting me in on this brand deal with them. You can use code AJL at checkout to get a hat, to get a hoodie, to get a beanie, whatever it is. They said they can put most of these graphics out there on it for you. And make sure you ask the merchant what kind of little sneak peek or advantage you'll get for using code AJL at checkout. Don't want to spoil it for you guys. You got to put the work in so you can see the type of benefits that you can reap if you go out and support the brand. All right, man, back half of the show. Falcons are signing Kirk Cousins to a 4-year deal. It's worth about $180 million. Cousins deal is worth $180 million, $45 million per season, including $100 million guaranteed. Brice, please explain to me why the Atlanta Falcons just allotted this type of money for a guy like Kirk Cousins, who has one career playoff win against my Saints.
I'm dead. Yeah. So obviously, for a lot of people who don't know, even from many things I do, I also cover Falcons too. So obviously, this was the big question: fan base split. You know how it goes,
right?
So this was my take on it, right? The Falcons signing Kirk Cousins says one thing: they want to win the Super Bowl this year. They're going all in. If you try to trade up, there's no guarantee Caleb Williams, Drake Mayer, Jane Daniels are going to be good enough to get you a Super Bowl. There's just you can't say there is, because the rookies, you have no idea. And then to me, this also shows me that they don't believe in Justin Fields is good enough to get them there too.
Correct.
And I also think too, you have Arthur Blank, who is 82, I believe. He's maybe going to give his team franchise to his son. Listen, I don't wish this on him. He may croak. We don't know.
Right.
He wants to win a Super Bowl before he dies. He told Terry and he told Raheem, get a veteran quarterback who can get us there. because
Yep.
we can't do the young quarterback thing if we're trying to win now.
Yeah, they're
Because
scarred
the
by that.
49ers tried to do that with Trey Lance, and we saw what happened.
Yep.
So they said, go get Kirk. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at the playoff record with Kirk, 1-3. Yes, he has not won the playoffs. Now, everything I always like to say is context. If you think about his record, I think someone posted a stat. I want to say that his team's defenses in those games gave up an average of like 28 to 31 points a game. If that means he's in shootouts in playoff games, because his numbers, I think he had like 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. From a numbers perspective, it was fine. It's not like he's played bad in those games.
Yeah.
It's just his team has let him down in those games. And so there's context to that. Kirk Cousins has shown he can get the ball to his weapons. That's one of the big things they want to do, maximize the weapons, because that's one of the big issues. Bijan, Pitts, Drake have not been maximized under Arthur Smith and under the quarterbacks they've had, Ritter and Mariota and Heineke. Kirk Cousins has shown he can get it to him. There's a reason why we think Jettis is one of the best receivers in the game. He wouldn't be considered that if he didn't get the ball. And so he's going to get the ball to the playmakers, maximize that. He is a guy who, before he got hurt last year, I Bleav he played 8-9 games. Can't remember exactly the number, but he had 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He was playing good ball before he got hurt.
Led the league in touchdowns, second in passing yards when he got hurt in week 8.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where I think they look at Zach Robinson coming in from Sean McVay's system. You had a quarterback similar to him in LA with Matthew Stafford. Maybe not the same arm talent, but basically pocket quarterbacks. You saw how that's worked for Matthew Stafford. People forget when Matthew Stafford was traded to the Rams. People still thought he's not that good. He didn't win in Detroit. Right. And everybody was like, okay, give him better coach, give him better system, give him better franchise. And you saw they won a Super Bowl. And I think this is what they're looking at with Kirk. He's probably going to have the best team he's ever had this year, especially with the other additions they're probably going to make to this roster. This will probably be the best roster that they've ever had. People are projecting the Falcons win the NFC South now. He's won games. I don't think it's about winning regular season games. The Falcons are probably going to win the amount of games they need to do in the playoffs. It's about getting to the Super Bowl, winning, maximizing their weapons. Raheem Morris understands that they have to be aggressive and they have to make that push. And there is nobody else on the market who could have done this for him. There just wasn't. And so you have to make this move because there's no point of trading the farm, trading your next two draft classes away for a potential quarterback, and then he ends up being a bust. That's going to get you fired right there. Kirk Cousins is essentially on a 2-year deal because they can let him go after the 3rd year because he only counts $10 million as the cap his 3rd year. So this is a 2-year deal. Try to win a chip and see what happens. And that way, that also can leave you in a good position because people also don't remember this. Got to pay Drake London in a couple of years.
Yes,
Pitts' contract's coming up.
Oh,
Bijan's going to come up in a few years.
Yep.
If Kirk Cousins in 2 years, if they decide to move off of him, now you're going to have money again to pay those guys and still keep your roster constructed. That's going to be the key. This is actually a very smart financial decision for the Falcons because if they did it over the 4 years, you're going to have to say, we're going to have to let one of them walk because we don't have the money. In 2 years, that's when you really got to start shoving out those deals.
Yep.
So that'll help them. And so I think Kirk Cousins is, I like to say, boring. He's not someone who's like, oh, Kirk Cousins.
Right.
But at the end of the day, he has won games in this league. He has won the divisions in this league. He can't put up great numbers. That's what they need from him because they need just better quarterback play. And listen, coming off the Achilles, it's a risk, but it's a risk you got to take if you're going to try to compete this year and stop being a team that has the talent, but just doesn't have the quarterback to get them over the top.
Yep. I want to piggyback off that Achilles comment there too, because, the money for a guy coming off an Achilles injury, you're never the same after the Achilles injury. I mean, I don't care who you are. We saw it with plenty of NBA athletes. We've seen it with NFL athletes as well. And that Achilles injury has unfortunately started to become a little more common as, the seasons have went on. Before Kirk Cousins suffered that week 8 Achilles injury, which again, he was first in passing touchdowns with 28 and second in the NFL in passing yards at about 2,850, I Bleav 2,900. Kirk Cousins had played in 136 of a possible 138 games. He missed 2 games, one where Minnesota rested their starters and another one where he tested positive for COVID-19 in 2021. So Kirk Cousins has been one of the most durable quarterbacks in the NFL really over the span of his career. And when we talk about the money aspect as well, he's also pretty damn good at making money as well. He just signed a $180 million deal with the Falcons, which, like you said, is about a 2-year deal. Realistically, they can get out of it after the 3rd year. And that's a very good point as well. The fact that they're going to have to look at Kyle Pitt's 5th-year option coming up. Drake London still got a couple years. Bijan Robinson will probably going to get paid the year after Drake. So they've got some paydays coming up for sure. But Kirk has made $231 million in his career so far. By the time he's done with Atlanta, he'll have over $300 million that he's made in the NFL. He's actually on track to be among the 3 highest paid players in NFL history, and all of this amounting for 1 playoff win. So that's where it kind of starts to bother me, and when you look at the yearly cash of Kirk Cousins, in year 1, he's getting paid 62.5. I don't care what you say, whether it's a signing bonus, whether it's a base salary, whether it's guarantees, whatever. Kirk Cousins with a 1-3 playoff record is getting paid $62.5 million in this first year of the deal. It does fall drastically by about $35 million to $27.5, and then in the 3rd year before they can get out, it'll be $45 million bucks. But if they have that potential out in 2027, he'll still have played 3 years, made $135 million, and they'll only have about 12.5 in dead cap. So while I do agree it was a smart decision because of the talent that they have coming up to pay, I still don't like the money, Brice. I don't at all. And what this tells me is that we know Kirk Cousins was, at this point, I would have put him above Russell Wilson because of what we've seen out of Russ the past 2 years and what we've seen out of Kirk. What have you done for me lately? If you're talking about in the grand scheme of things, I think a lot of people, if not most people, would take Russ over Kirk. Super Bowl winner, back-to-back Super Bowl appearances. We know what Russ was capable of and what he does at the peak of his game. But what this tells me is Kirk Cousins probably had a good bit of suitors, and rightfully so. So Atlanta had to come in with the bag to convince him that this was the place. In another great point, he probably is going to be on his best team with a Bijan, with a Kyle Pitts, with a Drake London. You got Tyler Algier. You got a solid defense behind you that was solid for Atlanta last year, and we're going to see how they continue to build on it. They do lose Jeff Okudah, but I don't think he's too much of a loss. He didn't play too much. They're still rocking Jesse Bates, AJ Terrell, a good bit of players that they swiped from the Saints last year in the offseason. I had a lot to say about the Falcons and the moves they made for their defense last year. But the fact that he's got $100 million guaranteed, it's just too much for me. $100 million guaranteed, $50 million at signing, and $90 million guaranteed over the first 2 years. Now, I think his $50 million at signing is broken out to, I think, 12.5 over 4 years of the contract, but it's that $62.5 million in that first year that really is an eye popper to me. I know the Falcons had some money to spend, but it's also, like you said, Atlanta needs a good distributor of the football. I Bleav when you look at this, it's a Matt Ryan 2.0 situation. Everybody was jonesing for Matt Ryan to get out of town. Oh yeah, 2016 MVP, took us to the Super Bowl. We lost. They're going to blame it on Matt. They're going to blame it on Kyle. But Matt Ryan was consistently, a lot like Kirk Cousins, a top 10 to 12 quarterback in this league. Yes, he wasn't flashy. Yes, he wasn't sexy, but he was delivering the ball. He was, fairly good pre-snap. And he was a veteran in the league. I mean, he won an MVP for a reason. Matt Ryan, far and away, barring it being under Kyle Shanahan's number 1 offense, was an MVP in 2016. And he played very, very well. And they've missed that. Matt Ryan leaves. They fail to pursue Deshaun Watson. It's the Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke, Desmond Ridder show. And they're just not able to muster a simple distributor of the football when you have all this talent on the team. But with you, following the Falcons so closely, and obviously I'll chime in on the question as well, did you want to see another option at QB1 for the Falcons? Because you are right. Justin Fields, kind of a question mark. As much as I love him, he still has some things to prove. And it would be a shaky situation coming over to Atlanta just because of what Justin Fields has done before. Obviously, Russell Wilson got away. It's always a risk to draft a quarterback. Did you want to see another option for QB1 at Atlanta, or maybe was there a better solution for it?
I was definitely one of the people at first in the process that I would have loved to maybe get a guy like Jane Daniels or a guy or even give Justin Fields a chance, because I just felt like I was looking at from a balance perspective. You trade for Justin Fields, probably doesn't cost you a lot of compensation. You don't have to pay him a lot this year. It's really his 5th-year option where that takes the pay bump. So You're able to keep cap, don't have to give up a lot, still can do a lot more with the roster. And then obviously, if Falcons had a worse record, or if there was a team in the top 3 that didn't need a quarterback, obviously, I just think, again, Jaden would have been a great fit for the Falcons and things like that. And we can get into the city and everything like that. But I think those would have been 2 options that I would have looked into. But like I said, I mean, Kirk Cousins also, one thing about him is that he does provide stability.
Yes,
and that's something they haven't had.
I think the Falcons are missing that.
that they had was with Matt was stability. And that's what Kirk will provide. He's a guy who relatively outside of the Achilles injury is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna, you know what you're gonna get from him. And I think that's ultimately what they wanted realistically amongst all of it. Just because they didn't want to have, because the thing with Justin Fields was if you trade for him and he doesn't take that leap that you need him to take.
Oh yeah,
Now
he's got to do it in year one.
back. Yeah, exactly. Now you're right back where you started. If you draft a quarterback, well, you're trying to win. So, what if the quarterback doesn't develop fast enough? There was just, it's interesting because the Falcons coaching staff, they have like 3 quarterback coaches, a passing coordinator, and offensive coordinator. And you would think, why do they need that many quarterback coaches for Kirk Cousins? It felt like the system that they were putting in place for quarterbacks was meant for a rookie or a Justin Fields potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, even with the draft of the signing of Kirk Cousins, the question is opened up. Do the Falcons still draft a quarterback in day 3 or day 2? Do they still, okay, if Kirk Cousins really might be a 2-year plan, do we start to get a guy? Then you start looking at guys like Spencer Rattler, Bo Nix, potentially as guys that you could go after potentially. So it's one of those things where if you look at it that way, that also helps provide flexibility because now it's, okay, we could get our guy, try to compete, have a guy behind him. I know also Michael Phoenix is another guy that some people were talking about.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where I get what people are saying and why the money seems rich, but at the end of the day, too, with the money, people always, I feel like, don't always kind of overlook it a little bit.
Right.
What he got paid is what starting quarterbacks get paid in this league in terms
Basically
of quarterbacks that you expect to get you there. Like at the end of the day, like I think he's the 7th highest paid, 8th highest paid quarterback in the game.
Yep.
It's not like he's top
36
5.
years old.
Yeah, he's not like he's top 5. So, this is the money. Like, is if you have a great year, you're now in line to get 130 million. Baker had one good year, boom, 115
million. Yep.
So that, and he doesn't probably have the same track record that Kirk has, just in terms of the quarterback position. So that at the end of the day, this is what you give up for guys. I mean, listen, when y'all signed Derrick Carr, I mean, y'all had to pay him a pretty penny to bring him in. Like that, that's just, regardless of what you think about Derrick Carr, that is what a starting quarterback goes for. All right. Now, I don't want to poke fun. Falcons fans say y'all basically signed expensive Desmond Ridder, but that's a different story.
You're right.
For another day.
You're right.
But that's how it is. So it's tough, but there's so much money in the game now.
Yeah.
That's
and with the salary cap going up too, highest it's ever been, most it's ever went up.
Yep. So.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And, I tell myself this all the time. And I think I just finally need to stick to what I'm saying, like, it's just if you're not in the tops of the league, like top 5 or 6, consensus or production or wins or going deep in the playoffs with talent, like, maybe outside of Brock Purdy, and hell, Brock might get 35 or 40 million a year now, once the time comes. I mean, they got a lot of people to pay in San Francisco and a lot of talent to maneuver, but still, like, quarterbacks get paid what they're paid. If Baker Mayfield can go out and basically make 33 million a year off of, his second or third best career year, maybe his best career year in Tampa, winning the division, winning a playoff game, and Daniel Jones can get 40. That's really where it messed it up. Like Daniel Jones got 40, and then everybody else was falling in line, because with Kirk Cousins being the highest paid, I mean, he's above a Josh Allen, he's above a Patrick Mahomes, he's above a Trevor Lawrence. Trevor still's got to get paid, and but those deals are going to get reworked. They're probably going to get a huge bag down the road. I Bleav Josh Allen was signed 2, maybe 3 seasons ago. Of course, Mahomes' deal is probably going to get revisited now, him being a 3-time champion versus when he had just won his first one. And the Chiefs were like, here's $500 million in a decade's worth of commitment. And of course, nobody would scoff at that. I think Russell Wilson would have been nice. I think a veteran presence to distribute that football like they brought in with Kirk Cousins would be sweet. Kirk's not going to give you a whole lot of mobility. I Bleav Russ is, a sharper, more in tune guy with pre-snap and post-snap than Kirk Cousins is, but some people might come back and, say no because of the last 2 years that we've seen out of Russell Wilson. And like you said, I understand why they didn't pull the trigger on Justin Fields as much as I would have liked to seen it. Would Raheem Morris have been able to get a hold of that? Would the quarterbacks coach, would Zach Robinson be able to actually have that effect on Justin Fields? And, I thought Atlanta with having the 8th pick, like, man, they could totally get into maybe the top 2 or top 3. And, with the money they have to spend, with the draft capital that they've got, like, go and chase a Jaden Daniels, maybe a Michael Penix if they wanted to take him that high. They could still maybe take Michael Penix at number 8. I don't see Penix a lot on a lot of first round boards, or really, if any, but I Bleav he's a first round quarterback. There was a reason that guy played so well for Washington under Kalen DeBoer, got to the national championship, and he was just outmatched by the best defense and the best run game in the country that not only stifled him, but kept him off the field. But it's always risky to draft a rookie quarterback, right? You don't know what you're getting. The speed of the game is going to get to them. That's their first year in the league. But in the same breath, like, the Falcons also know what Kirk Cousins is, and that's kind of a double-edged sword. He's going to distribute the football for you. He's going to be solid, but he's still a 78, 70, and 2 career record guy. 1 playoff win against the Saints. He struggles in prime time. We saw him kind of get better with that, but we only saw half a season of him. But we know that he's going to probably put up that 4,000, maybe 4,300 yards. He can get you 30 passing touchdowns. He can not turn the ball over a lot, and that's what Atlanta really needs. So how far do you think Kirk Cousins is going to take Falcons in the first year? Or maybe even if you want to look at a bird's eye view, if you want to look into the next 2-3 years, what do you think Kirk does in terms of maybe a record and playoff depth for the Atlanta Falcons now?
It's an interesting question, because you really don't really know. Because like I said, there's still beginning free agency, still moves to be made. They did get Darnell Mooney today. Got to add to that receiving core. They could potentially go Malik Neighbors at 8. That could, because Minnesota had weapons, receiving weapons, and the Falcons want to replicate that here in Atlanta, because what he can do with them. So I think overall, it feels like this team, the way it's trending, should win the division. They should be favorites, and you probably think you can maybe be an 11-win team, maybe 12, depending. They have a tougher schedule this year, so it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver that. But I think 11, 12 wins. If you get lucky, you can maybe creep into 13. Now you're talking maybe potential number 1, number 2 seed.
Oh wow,
in the NFC.
12 or 13.
It feels like
Brice.
It feels like with this move, you kind of feel like, all right, you got to make the NFC Championship game. You're not just trying to get into the playoffs. You're trying to win a couple of games in the playoffs and take that next step. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So I think that's where the expectation should be. I think that there's no other expectation there can be, is that you're taking that step. And the NFC is not he's not playing Mahomes and all them. Right? I mean, if you look at the NFC last year, the quarterback who came out was Brock Purdy. 49ers have a really good roster, but Brock Purdy wasn't a world beater last year.
Right.
It was just a battle. The 49ers had one of the best rosters in the game, and that helped him. So if the Falcons feel like they can get their roster on par with those teams, some people will probably maybe take Kirk Cousins over Brock Purdy in that situation, just because of the fact that, if you look at the two guys just from a talent perspective, Brock Purdy, we know the questions that have been asked about him. Kirk Cousins, we know about the questions he's been asked about in prime time. But all you need for any playoff run is you just need to play 2-3 good games.
Yep. You
just got to get hot for a couple games. That's the one thing about play. That's
get hot and get healthy.
You just gotta play. He doesn't even have to play elite. With the talent that they should have, he just has to play well.
Right.
If he could just be well and don't make the big mistake, there's no reason why the Falcons maybe couldn't get there. And we'll see what the identity of this team is once we get into the season. Because like I said, you're probably gonna see something similar to what the Rams are doing. So what we've seen with the Rams is what they're now trying to do with Kirk Cousins. And like I said, the Rams formula has won a Super Bowl. Raheem Morris was there. He is taking a lot of that blueprint from what McVay and them did to Atlanta and saying, we're going to follow this model because this is one. Listen, they had a down year because, the Rams went like all in. So you're going to have a down year when you do that. But after that one down year, they were back in the postseason.
Yep.
Consistency, building a winner. You got your quarterback too. That's what they're hoping here. With
didn't they go to the divisional this year?
I believe.
Yeah, against the Lions, right?
No.
Maybe?
Wait.
I know the Rams made the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they lost in the first round, though. I can't remember to who, though.
Yeah.
I think the Lions beat Tampa Bay to get to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
So I think they lost I just can't remember who they played in the first round.
I'm pulling it up here. They lost the wild card to the Lions 24-23. Yeah. So they came close. Sorry, it was the wild card, not the divisional. Yeah. But yeah, I remember them because it was the, Matt Stafford, Jared Goff type of revenge game. When when I look at the Kirk Cousins situation with the Atlanta Falcons, I see about 9 to 10 wins on the schedule. I think 11 to 12 is a little generous. I want to see what Zach Robinson and Raheem Morris still out there. Excellent points by you. Also, talking about how they're going to bring that blue pin over. That scheme, that system won a Super Bowl, and ultimately that's what the Falcons are pushing towards. But for me, this isn't a needle mover. Like, yes, it's going to make them better, but I don't Bleav we're talking, divisional round, maybe NFC championship, because the Lions, the Niners, the Packers, like they're still there to play. The Cowboys are still there. The Eagles are still there. While I do Bleav Atlanta could be a top 7 seed in the NFC and, fight for the NFC South, I think the Saints and maybe even the Bucs are going to put up, some of a fight as well. But it's not a major needle mover for me. They basically get Matt Ryan back. I mean, he's 36 years old. He's getting a big contract. Not that Matt ever did get the huge contract, but they know what they're getting in Kirk Cousins. Really a comfort move from Atlanta because they remember how good Matt was at distributing the football. Chris Jones becomes the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL with a new 5-year, $159 million deal, basically 158.75. Do you think this contract was too big? Defensive tackles are a little bit of an anomaly. I feel like it's Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, and then maybe everywhere else, either playing as a linebacker or an edge. What were your thoughts on this massive payday for Chris Jones, where it basically now nets him the highest paid defensive tackle in the league over Aaron Donald?
I think this was a situation where the Chiefs were lucky because the salary cap spiked. If the salary cap did not spike, they probably would have lost Chris Jones. And with the salary cap spiking, they were now able to keep him, and they may be able to now keep Jerry Sneed on the franchise tag.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, for the deal for Chris Jones, I think it's easy to say, why are you paying a defensive lineman that much money? But we know the impact Chris Jones has had on that defense, the big plays he's made, the leader he's been on that defense for years in Kansas City. Kansas City's had their best defense since Mahomes has been there this past year, and he was a big part of that. And so for them, they're just viewing him as like, listen, we want you to finish your career here. You're one of the leaders of the defense here.
Mm-hmm.
You are still a big play defensive tackle. You can still disrupt. You can still close games. We are willing. This may be a little bit of also what the Lakers kind of did with Kobe in his last couple of years, where they gave him his big contract, kind of like almost like a legacy contract. What you've done here, plus what you have produced recently, we feel like it's worth giving you this deal. So overall, I think, the Chiefs did what they feel like they need to do. They wanted to keep the core in place. I Bleav they look at Chris Jones as part of the core guys. And they want him to, like I said, continue to be that game wrecker. Especially, again, you're playing a division where you go against Justin Herbert. I mean, Aiden O'Connell, I guess, is the guy for the Raiders. But you're going to get Matthew Stafford. So, those guys are not, outside of Herbert, they're not the most mobile guys in the world. So if Chris Jones can get pressure up the middle, which is the worst place as a quarterback you want pressure from, it could be big, because you just got to think about what he's meant to this defense the last few years. Because, he has made big plays. He's made big plays.
Especially in the playoffs and the AFC Championship against Joe Burrow, man. Woo!
Exactly. So that's the big thing, I think, there for the Chiefs, and why they went ahead and made this move. They just happened to be able to get that $30 million cap spike and say, oh, we can pay Chris Jones now. We don't have to lose our best defensive player on our team.
Right. Yeah, Chris Jones definitely got a big payday. This is his third deal, and it's a big one. It's his biggest one. 4 weeks after winning his third Super Bowl, he comes and cashes in. And like we've always said, if there's 3 positions you pay in the NFL, it's quarterback, edge rusher, and corner. Like, you always pay those guys. You got to have someone to distribute the football. You got to have someone to get on the guy's ass who's distributing the football. And you have to have someone defend against the guy who's putting the football in the air. There's always no question that you pay those 3 guys. Like I said, highest paid DT in the league, the average of $31.75 million. I think that's the huge eye opener to me. It surpasses the $31.67 average from the 3-year, $95 million deal that Aaron Donald got in 2022. And when you look into the deal for Chris Jones, what it basically comes out to is about a 3-year deal with a practical guarantee of $95.3 million, which literally surpassed Aaron Donald's of $95 million. There's an offseason workout bonus of $100,000 with each of the 5 years, which kind of gives him that bump and that edge there. Although 3 years aren't fully guaranteed at signing, the Chiefs would have to cut him after 1 year to avoid the $95 million obligation. If they do, they would owe him $60.2 million for 1 year. They have an option on the final 2 years. It remains to be seen whether the Chiefs will pay him 28.5 in 2027 when he's 32, or at 33 when that salary becomes literally the same age as him at 33.5 million. But yeah, Chris Jones has always held it down. I mean, you look with him. God, I'm trying to make sure I have the numbers here. You look with him, he had 10.5 sacks last year, 15.5 sacks the year before, 9 sacks the year before that. So he's given you about 35 sacks over the last 3 years, and he's going to be in the backfield, 13 tackles for loss this year, 17 tackles for loss the year before, 8 the year before that, back-to-back first-team All-Pro, back-to-back Super Bowl champion, going to be chasing the three-peat. I think this was a no-brainer for sure that the Chiefs had to lock him up because, again, next to Aaron Donald, Chris Jones is that one in line, if not the best right now, and, of course, the payday says that he's going to be the best and the highest paid defensive tackle. We already talked about if it was really mandatory for Kansas City. I think there was no question. Like we said, you pay the guy that locks down the defensive line, who can stuff the run, who can get after the quarterback. He's in those top 3 non-negotiable positions that you have to pay. And I'm happy for Chris Jones. I think he deserved this payday. He earned it. And when you look at how Kansas City is going to have a very effective playmaker on the defensive side of the ball, who's in its prime right now with Steve Spagnuolo, I think they should do everything in their power really is over, keep Spagnuolo and Chris Jones in place, and I think they'll be in very good hands. And if they continue to draft guys like Trent McDuffie, get guys like L'Jarius Sneed, it's going to be solid in the secondary, no question about it. Derrick Henry is now a Baltimore Raven, Brice, and I don't know why this wasn't a team I did not see him going to. 2 years, $16 million. Only $8 million a year for a guy like the King, who's, most recently off the 2,000-yard season, not of last year, but of course, over the last few seasons, we saw that pop up. Who were your losers of this deal? Who do you think were some trade suitors that, or not even trade suitors, but guys that could have signed him out of free agency that maybe missed out on King Henry?
I think it's like, the teams that you would usually think of. Maybe, you can maybe see Houston maybe going in that direction. I think Houston would have been a really, really, really good move if they could go after him a little bit. Maybe, even the Panthers, maybe they needed somebody. It's easy to say Chiefs, but I think they like their utility backs that they have. It fits well with what they do there.
For sure. They're knocking out of the park with Pacheco right now.
Maybe Chargers because you lost,
Eckler.
You lost, Eckler. So, because Derrick Henry could help a lot of teams. Maybe even Bengals, they're trying to move off of Joe Mixon. Those are just a few teams that maybe could have, used Derrick Henry. But the Ravens is an interesting fit. Somebody said, listen, I can't wait for the primetime all black with the visor, Derrick Henry. It's about to go crazy.
Dude's going to look crazy with the purple numbers on his back, bro.
It's about to go crazy. But, this is really a good move for them. If you think about the backs they've had a lot of just speed, a lot of elusive backs with Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry is kind of the one complete, can outrun you, can run over you kind of guy. Yeah. And with him and Lamar,
he's
feels
the bell
like,
cow next to Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, like with him, it's like, wow, like, okay, this is, and the rushing tag has already been great. Like, it's not like this is a move that just now takes them from like the 20th ranked rushing offense to top 10. Like, they're already a top rushing offense.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it gives them a different element, gives them a different type of player that they haven't had, and just the dynamicness of a Derrick Henry and what he can do as a running back within that system with Todd Monken. And like I said, with Lamar Jackson, and just trying to do something with that. It'll be interesting to see because they do a lot of zone read, a lot of that. Derrick has done a lot of like I formation downhill a lot in Tennessee. So it'll be interesting to see how does he adjust to the RPOs and things of that nature. But this definitely could be a really solid move for him. And again, playing in cold weather in Baltimore, you gotta run the football. Those games against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're always physical. So we have a guy like Derrick Henry who just pounded on the Pittsburgh defense throughout the game, tiring them out. That could be what they're trying to do. Like the Ravens are a smash mouth team, but like they've never had the true smash mouth back.
Right.
And now you have that.
Right.
Now you have that in Derrick Henry.
Yes, you do.
And that may be something they felt like they missed. Maybe they felt like in the Kansas City game, if we had Derrick Henry, that may have helped us in that type of a game than what we've had, where all of our guys are kind of, finesse. So, and that's what the Chiefs have on their end. So the defense is used to playing against that. And maybe Derrick Henry could have made a difference for us.
Yeah. Yeah, now very, very good points there for sure. I think the losers of this deal were, a lot like you said. I think the Bengals, the Chargers would have been a good fit, but I think it comes down to the Bills, the Texans, and realistically the Cowboys. Kind of like some of the suitors that would have been in place for Saquon as well. Josh Allen getting that weapon for that relief, C.J. Stroud getting another weapon in his second year as a sophomore in the National Football League, and then the Cowboys always feel like they're on the prowl, for a good running back. We saw them take Zeke Elliott. Now that Tony Pollard's out of town, and there's really nobody in that running back room. I mean, is Deuce Vaughn going to step up and be the running back one? While he could, we really don't know what the situation is going to be. And, I think either the Ravens or the Bills, Texans, Cowboys, like I said, those are really the four best fits for him. I'll probably throw the Chargers in there as well. I don't know why I've been sleeping on their running back needs a little bit, because I do think Austin Eckler is a very, very solid guy at the running back position. And even in all positions outside of quarterback, he's led the NFL in total touchdowns over the last 3 years, because he can not only rush it into the end zone, but he can receive it into the end zone as well. And we know with him being a dual threat back, having Derrick Henry to replace him, while he isn't necessarily a dual threat, he is that bell cow, that now is going to come into Baltimore, but really could have benefited the Chargers for sure. We know Baltimore, like you said, is a smash mouth power running football team. That's what they do. A lot of power runs, a lot of ISOs. They might hit you with a sweep or, maybe a zone read. But I love the point that you made about the Ravens have been so well at running the football without a true star back. We know they draft J.K. Dobbins. He had injury after injury. We know Gus Edwards, who is now out of town, has had injury after injury. Same thing with Justice Hill. But when all three of those guys were healthy, that running back by committee was arguably one of the best in the NFL, and we were able to see that. But now Lamar Jackson has that surefire bell cow back in Derrick Henry. He knows that when he turns around behind him, he's probably got 75 to 85, 90 yards coming on the back, or coming off of the back of Derrick Henry. And we know that's what he's capable of. And it's pretty impressive to know that the Ravens have been able to be one of the most respected rushing teams in the NFL, obviously with a large part of that being Lamar Jackson. But when you look at the injuries of, again, that trio of the players in the backfield, and now you plug in Derrick Henry, it feels like all those, situations are solved rather for lack of better words. But with this move, and I heard you talk about it, maybe if they had this move against Kansas City, they would have won. I digress. I think it's another reason, but I'll give that in my part of the take. I want to let you get it first. Do you think this was the move that Baltimore needed to make, considering I guess you could call it a flop in the AFC Championship game, even though it was a big battle of defenses there against now the back-to-back Super Bowl champions?
This move would definitely help, like I said, with them. I think obviously you maybe still look at receiver, and just the offense as a whole didn't have a great game in that game, but I think Derrick Henry definitely will help with what they needed, and I think he'll provide a different element that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
Like I said, he can help wear down the Kansas City defenders, pound them, what I'm saying, constantly, 2-3 yards turn into 4 or 5 yards as the game goes on.
Yeah.
And
I'm shoulder pads starting to get a little heavy after a while.
Exactly. So, if that happens, and then like let's say we'll see. You would assume they're in the wide receiver market, probably not a free agency, maybe, probably, unless they get in on the T. Higgins. You never know. But maybe you look at the draft again, strong draft for receivers. You add Derrick Henry with that, you probably feel like, all right, we have our offense pretty set. We have our dynamic running game. We have our dynamic receiver. We have dynamic Lamar Jackson. We have Mark Andrews. We have every position filled. You still got Zay Flowers, who can be dynamic. And you feel much just better overall about what you have. And I think Derrick Henry was just the first step in maybe completing that vision. But we'll have to see how the offseason kind of, changes. Because Ravens have lost a couple people in free agency defensively. So we're going to have to see how that happens. Are they maybe turning into more of an offensive dependent team? Maybe. So, I mean, that could also be one of the reasons why they made this move.
Yeah. I don't think this was the move that Baltimore needed. All they did was double down on a strength. And while you should do that to get better at what you're supposed to be better at, I think the sole fact was Chris Jones said it. We make Lamar Jackson work right in the pocket. We could possibly blow him out. It wasn't a blowout, but it definitely wasn't a good showing from Lamar. I mean, after he had the deep ball to Zay Flowers, there wasn't much to come in after that. I think the score was 17-14 in the AFC Championship game. We know it was a battle of defenses, but I think it solely fell back on the fact that even though he came off an MVP season, he's now a 2-time MVP. Not a lot of people can say they have one, let alone two. Lamar Jackson still needed to be better from the pocket. Lamar Jackson still needed to be better adjusting after halftime. And I'm going to take a look at John Harbaugh as well, because when we saw what that game was at halftime, And when we saw how the game ended, the Ravens completely abandoned the run. And so if you bring in Derrick Henry to supplement for that, I'll say right now, if Derrick Henry was in that AFC Championship game, Baltimore's still not winning. The Chiefs defense was elite. The Chiefs defense was absolutely shutting down the run in the second half of the football game. And we also see the Lions, they abandoned the run as well when they were in the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, we're in a different conference, but just to kind of show you, like, if you abandon your identity, the Ravens had a horrible game plan, an absolutely horrible game plan. I want to say Lamar Jackson dropped back. It was a top 2 to 3 game on the season for the amount of dropbacks he had. Their record was exponentially better when Lamar Jackson had, I think, less than 20 to 25 dropbacks. He dropped back over 25 times, and they're not nearly as an effective team. Again, they doubled down on their strengths, and they've needed this type of running back to just have that real solidarity. We know that we can give this guy the ball in his belly 15 to 25 times a game, and he's more than likely not going to give us 100 yards and at least a touchdown or two, and that's always going to help. But I'll never say that a running back is the reason why you get over the hump. I had a Cowboys fan in my DMs earlier today saying, damn, he went to the Ravens. God, we could have beat the Packers, possibly would have had Derrick Henry. I said, bro, you know that a running back doesn't take you over the hump. Great friend of mine, really my brother, my cousin Alan, he was like, man, the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl next year. I said, I understand why you think that, but it's just a running back. And I'm not saying Derrick Henry is just like every other running back, but it's going to take a lot for me to say that the running back's going to get you over the hump. All respect to the 49ers. They've had back-to-back NFC Championship games, and they were just in a Super Bowl. Did Christian McCaffrey get them over the hump? Because they had an amazing running back by committee, whether it was, I believe, Jeff Wilson, whether it was a Tevin Coleman, whether it was a Matt Breida. They still knew how to run the football. They were still in the tops of the league of running the football, rush yards per game, total rush yards, rushing touchdowns. So again, I don't think this was the move, but Baltimore is going to be very fun to watch. Last topic of the show, the Bucs are giving Baker Mayfield $100 million over 3 years. It's worth up to $115 million in total. What are your thoughts on the size of the contract for a guy like Baker Mayfield, who's kind of been a journeyman over the last few years and now kind of bet on himself and gets the big payday?
Yeah, I mean, like I get what you were talking about earlier with Kirk. I mean, I think what you're seeing with him is what the going rate for quarterbacks are. I think for him, he had a great year with Tampa, and that was big for him to get his redemption and get himself back on track. And I think he has good chemistry with the weapons there, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and so I think overall, I think this is a really good move for Baker. I mean, if you think about it in the grand scheme again, 115 million, that's not it's not.
It's not a ton
insane.
Of money for a QB over 3 years. Yeah.
It feels like it, but it's not. And so,
and they're able to pay Mike handsomely as well.
Exactly. So you're able to get your starting quarterback locked in, and that's ultimately what they wanted: stability. They feel like Baker Mayfield gives them stability. We'll see if they start looking into, do we need to consider thinking about life after Baker Mayfield at some point? But I think overall, with the money that they're making with Baker, I think this is a solid deal for him, a solid deal for the team. And, we don't know what other teams would have offered Baker Mayfield. I know that some people said that the Falcons didn't get Kirk Cousins. Baker might have been their backup plan. Right. We don't know what that would have turned into. We don't know how many other teams may have looked at him as a backup plan for them. So, it's one of those things where, Baker's always kind of had that moxie and that talent. I think it's just been about stability. It's been about the team, the weapons,
Correct.
Cleveland has been a mess of organization. You know how that goes. It's just one of those things where he kind of feels like maybe he's found a solid place and a solid stability in Tampa Bay. And now he's trying to use that as his ability to now continue to play well. Because at the end of the day, he didn't have an elite season, but he had a really good season.
Right.
And I think that's what I think they said, if you can give us this consistently, I don't see this being an overpay at all for a guy like you.
Yeah. 100 or 115 million, whatever it is. It's really not a lot in the grand scheme of things. I'm happy for the fact that Baker Mayfield went from the Browns, lightning in a bottle year, ironically never made the Pro Bowl there. This last year that he was with the Bucs was his first year making the Pro Bowl. Then we see his hand in the dirt taking snaps for the Panthers. We see him go to the Rams, and then he signs a 1-year, $4 million deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and really bet on himself. I mean, he had, Taylor Heineke and Jarrett Stidham were making more per year in terms of what they were making on their base salary than Baker Mayfield was last year. And Baker came in preseason, did a great job, 4,044 yards, 28 touchdowns, Pro Bowl for the first time, won the NFC South, won a playoff game too. So the fact that he bet on himself really, really paid off. And here's the crazy part, right? This is why I love this kind of, full circle moment for him. The Browns were so eager to move on from Baker Mayfield that they were willing to pay $10.5 million of his $15.5 million salary. So about 70% of the money they were willing to put that onto him, or excuse me, put that, pay that for him while he was with the Carolina Panthers in 2022. And of course, we see the stupid move of them chasing Deshaun Watson, desperate move from a desperate franchise. So the money there didn't make sense. And even the money before, how they wanted to ship him out, it's just more blemishes on that ownership, with the Lord have mercy, the Cleveland Browns. But Baker's 29 years old. He's still could have plenty of prime years in front of him. We know that he's a former number 1 overall pick. I always thought it was pretty solid in college. I thought his judgment could have been better, as a lot of people thought as well. But him coming in 3 years, $100 million, they're definitely continuing to work on their core. And you look even further, he gets $30 million fully guaranteed in year 1, another $10 million guaranteed in 2025 at signing, and then he'll get another $10 million for injury that becomes fully vested next year. So just a little bit of a raise from the about $7 million that Baker Mayfield was making, really 6.85 that he was making there, in 2023. But I mean, like you said, this is the going rate for a quarterback now. And if Baker Mayfield can have a season this year like he did last year, continue that continuity with Mike Evans, possibly be in the contention for a weak NFC South, who knows if he could even win another playoff game, despite if it's the Eagles that are reeling in the back half of the season. Baker went out there and he did that. And when you go from being that number 1 overall pick, journeyman between the Rams and the Panthers, now you score your deal with the Bucs, and then you do this, hats off to him, man. I couldn't be happier for a guy in Baker, because I think his game is now going to be at another level, possibly. I Bleav it hit that next level with Dave Canales, but now, again, with him being gone, as I said earlier in the show, that does worry me some. With Tampa having such a, fairly strong roster, I mean, they've always had a strong roster, and that's why when they, plugged out Jameis, plugged in Tom Brady, they were able to do what they did in the first year and winning the Super Bowl. Do you think this was the right move for Tampa? Would you maybe have liked to see them go after a free agent QB, or maybe move up in the draft to take a guy?
Well, I think, when you always ask these questions, you got to think about, what do you have compared to what you can get?
Yep.
Not in really position to get a quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, I think they're picking 26th, 28th.
Yes.
Because they want a playoff game. They're in those high 20s.
So, and then you got to think about, okay, so if you can't do that, okay, who's available? Kirk Cousins probably, right? Russell Wilson. All right, are they really that much better than Baker? That's the first question you got to ask yourself.
Right,
then,
especially at this point with those two.
Exactly, and then you got to think about what money they would want, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's no point to replace Baker with Russell if you think they're the same player. It's like, okay, he's cheaper, but he's the same player. What does that do for us if he's on a 1-year deal? And then what if he falls off? Like, it's one of those things too where I think Mike wanted to play with Baker. I think the receivers have some say in that, because they obviously are like, I want to know who's throwing me the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, once Mike Evans got locked up, Baker's interest to come back to Tampa Bay was greater. So It was one of those things where it's that situation where it's like, I mean, you really didn't have a better option.
Right.
And
compared
so
to the money and what those other free agent quarterbacks were showing.
Continue to build and see where it takes you. Obviously, now losing Canales could be big. We'll see how that affects the offense. But it was one of those situations where it's like, you really couldn't go really nowhere else with it.
Right.
There's no point to move off of someone if you know you're not getting a clear upgrade from Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. Yeah, very fair point there. I feel like I would have liked to see, I wouldn't say a stacked roster, but it's one of the, better rounded ones in the NFL. The offense is respectable with the players they present, especially in the receiving core. The offensive line production, we look at the defense as well. That's always there. Todd Bowles being that defensive-minded head coach, we understand that, unlike any team, but especially with Tampa, or like any team, especially with Tampa, like when Tampa's healthy on the defensive side of the ball, they can hang with some of the best offenses in the league. They can go out there and win you games defensively. And now Baker on the flip side, being that solid distributor of the football, you can do nothing but appreciate it and just be happy for the fact that this guy found himself to another deal. We didn't know if Baker was going to be anything. Like, we're over here calling him a bust possibly after the first couple years. And while his first, his rookie year was fantastic, you see as things play on, and he's at the mercy of Freddie Kitchens, and then Kevin Stefanski comes in, wins coach of the year. They almost go to the AFC Championship. Chad Henne has to come in for the Chiefs and make a throw. The Browns are blowing out the Steelers that year, though, in the playoffs, and now Kevin Stefanski is winning another coach of the year. But then he takes his talents over to the Bucs and does what he's able to do, and it's just it's remarkable to know that he kept his composure after kind of being a journeyman over those last 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, it felt like he was with 3 teams within a span of a season and a half, a season, maybe 2 seasons, because he was with the Browns over to the Panthers. The Panthers trade him in the middle of the year to the Rams, and then he, takes that a little bit better than a vet minimum, but that big time prove it deal going over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It would have been nice, again, to see Tampa Bay maybe compete for a top quarterback in the draft. I think a Michael Penix could have been a nice suitor. Maybe they could sit there at, I believe it's 26 or 28, those high 20s in the first round pick, in the first round of the draft, and possibly snag him. And maybe I'm a little delusional, but whenever I see teams that have got some cap space money to spend and they've managed it well and they're able to hand out deals like this, I'm like, well, dang, they probably had some draft capital in there. I mean, you can always, I know it sounds funny, but like you can trade part of your yearly cash. We've seen it done on a rare occasion, and I think you have to work it out a certain way, but it would have been nice to see them chase, a quarterback that's coming in for this draft. But a lot like you said, when you look at all the other quarterbacks that were in free agency, they were either snagged or not as desirable compared to Baker Mayfield's last year. And when you look at the money they would have commanded, I mean, the Steelers got a steal. After this year, the Broncos are taking $85 million. Who knows what it's going to kick in like for the Pittsburgh Steelers? That's why it's a 1-year deal. They don't want to have to be financially committed. And Kirk Cousins just got the bag backed up to him. So they definitely take a nice pay cut here as Baker Mayfield is able to secure this contract and not necessarily break him out. Man, that was a packed one. I said I wasn't going to hold you for this long, but I appreciate the hell out of you, Brice, for popping in. This was episode 67 of the NFL with AJL. I appreciate everybody jumping into the show. It was a live one as we went over everything going on in NFL free agency. Friday show is going to have another probably 7, 8, 9 moves that I didn't put in here on the show because we had to be able to get through it in under 2 hours. Again, man, I'm sorry that I kept you for an hour 45. But before we get out of here, please make sure to like and share the stream wherever you're watching. Subscribe on YouTube. We've had 80 plus people viewing on Twitter this entire time, so I appreciate the support from you guys. Definitely got to start paying attention more to the Twitter account. As always, we're sponsored by Buy and Sell with AJL for all your worldwide professional real estate needs at PrayStation Online as well. If you want to get a chance to support those 2 brands that are so kind to sponsor the show. Of course, the QR code there in the corner of the screen will give you every bit of social media and podcast content. If you can't find us, you're simply not looking hard enough at the NFL with AJL at Brice_2K on all social media platforms. Man, before we get out of here, do you want to tell the people how to check you out or maybe some stuff you're working on, Mr. Fantastic News Producer at WYFF?
I'm dead. Yeah, man. So obviously y'all can subscribe to YouTube. Also, Brice_2K. Bleav in Hawks. I do for the Bleav Podcast Network, covering the Atlanta Hawks throughout the year. So if you're a Hawks fan or a basketball fan and you just like listen to basketball podcasts, definitely check that out. Also available on any podcast platform. Also do Falcons content strictly on YouTube as well. Just got a video up about the Kirk Cousins signing yesterday. If you want to check that out, also on there.
Sure.
Follow me on Twitter, Brice_2K there for all my tweets about Hawks, Falcons, and sports in general. Very, very heavy on the sports there as well. And yeah, I think that is the main gist. And yeah, just continuing to, cover both Falcons and Hawks as the seasons go on, or off season for the Falcons go on, and have some guests on and things like that. So definitely check it out. I think we're gonna have a great time, a great few months coming up.
Yes, sir. Man, Brice, I appreciate you so much for jumping on. Again, we'll be back on episode 68 on Friday. Definitely trying to get back into the groove of the 2 shows a week. We've got so much NFL content going on. The draft is in about a month. Man, I'd love to have you back on the show. Maybe if we could do a live draft review or a mock, or I bring you in during the draft to kind of chop it up. But you were fantastic tonight, bro. I loved your knowledge. Your delivery was great. And again, hopping in for episode 67 was a blessing to have you on. As always, folks, we will see you on the next